Welcome, everybody. I'm Zeus Talks from ZK Research, and I'm here for another ZKast video podcast. As always, this is done in conjunction with my media partner, eWEEK. I'm joined today as part of a thought leadership series with Bob Friday, who was one of the founders of Mist, who's now actually part of Juniper Networks, they were acquired a couple of years ago now. So, Bob, why don't you say hi to everybody, introduce yourself, and give us a little background on what Mist does.
Yeah, thank you, Zeus, and thank you for having me here today. You know, my background has been mostly wireless most of my career. And I send a thank you letter to the FCC every year for the unlicensed. You know, most of my career has been spent building mesh networks, unlicensed, wireless controller type of stuff. You know, I did aerospace one time, which was really around wireless controllers for the enterprise. Sold that company to Cisco and was Cisco CTO for 6-8 years, and then left Cisco to go off and start Mist, which is really around cloud and AI, and where I'm here with you today to discuss.
Yeah, and we've kind of joked over the years since you've been part of Juniper that this was almost a reverse acquisition where, although Juniper acquired Mist, you can see the Mist influence inside Juniper now, having this AI influence across the entire enterprise portfolio. So that's been kind of fun to watch. I've noticed the enterprise business at Juniper, it seems like Juniper's almost doubled down on the enterprise. I think during the last earnings call, we just had actually an analyst call with some of the Juniper execs, and Rami talked about enterprise being the growth engine. He actually predicted that pretty soon it would be bigger than service provider, which I think a few years ago, no one would have predicted that, right? For Juniper to have an enterprise business that's growing that fast. So can you expand on that?
Yeah, if you look what Rami and the executive team of Juniper are looking at doing, Juniper historically has been known as kind of a high performance routing company for service providers. Rami and team are really looking to diversify Juniper and really turn it into more of a software company, right? So you see a lot of things happening at Juniper as it transforms itself. We're extending the businesses across SP, enterprise, data center, and security. So organizationally, we're getting focused around these 4 different business areas. And then inside those businesses, we're really starting to transform ourselves from kind of the hardware to more of a day 0, day 1, day 2 software company. And you kind of see that because that's where our customers are driving us to, right? That's where customers are asking for help as these networks become more complex. They're really asking for their vendors to actually become, help them with the software problem of how they deploy and operate software and how we're going to operate these networks going forward. So I think that's where you're seeing Rami and the team actually being driven by both the investors and from the customers that are driving us more towards this diversified company with more of a software focus.
Yeah. Now, one of the principles with which I conduct my research has always been that market, share gains and opportunity to create a market transition. And I think in the enterprise network space, it seems like we're in this big transition where more and more networking is moving to the cloud, right? In fact, if you look at the impact cloud's had across all of IT, everything's moved to the cloud except networking. It's kind of lagged behind. So can you talk a little bit about what's been driving that?
Yeah, if you look at the origin story for Mist, right? I mean, Sujay and I were at Cisco when we acquired Meraki, right? And that was really the beginnings of how cloud was going to be able to simplify networking. But what we started to really hear from customers when I was there was really, we're watching kind of these wireless networks go from a nice to have to a must have to really they're going to business critical. And I had a couple of very large customers tell me, Bob, hey, before we put any consumer experience on our network, one, you had to stop your controllers from crashing, so they wanted better software reliability. 2, they wanted me to keep up with their mobile, digital transformation projects. They were building mobile apps every month. The network was still being updated every year type of thing. So they wanted to keep it speed. And probably third, more importantly, was I call it the paradigm shift from we're not here to help them manage access points or routers, which is what I did at Aerospace, right? There the paradigm is helping customers manage these AP switches and routers. Really, the paradigm shift is really helping customers manage the end-to-end user experience, what we call client to cloud. And it's really, they wanted visibility, before they put a robot or a mobile app onto their network, they really want to make sure they have complete end-to-end connectivity and visibility, all the way from that client device to the internet. And that was really the big market transition that, really drove Mist. It's one of the reasons Sujay and I left Cisco, right? And we really took a bet that, networking required both a cloud and AI architectural change. And if you were going to do this, you really easier to do with a blank sheet of paper, because there's really an architectural change that's happened in networking right now.
When people think of Mist, people think of, in fact, I'm looking at the little background behind you. You've got the little Wi-Fi symbols on there. And when you launched, you were a Wi-Fi company. You're part of Gartner's, Wi-Fi, wired wireless LAN, Magic Quadrant. But in fact, give the people watching this on eWEEK and my YouTube channel a little more detail on what Mist is. It's not really a Wi-Fi company as much as it is a cloud AI company, correct?
No, that's correct. And that's what I'm saying. If you look at the origin of Mist, it was really around the thesis of, cloud is this fundamentally a better way to develop and maintain software, and that's why people are starting to move more and more of their applications to cloud. One is the innovation speed, the fact that we can build software more reliably and at scale on the cloud. And then the second thing is this AI transition, right? And that was really kind of the other part of Mist is, can we really build something on par with a human? And when I saw, I don't know if you remember Watson. You remember Watson playing Jeopardy?
Yes. Chess.
Yeah. That was kind of one of the inspirations is, hey, if they can build something, they can play Jeopardy on par with, a Jeopardy champion. We should be able to build something that can really play Jeopardy on par with a network domain expert. And that was kind of that, when I started to realize that, technology was happening, right? AI was really going from this marketing story into something that was going to be useful for all different industries, including network, right? And beyond just cars, we're going to see AI actually make a difference across all our verticals.
Yeah. So how close is it right now? If you're, if you think of the big leap that Watson took, winning Jeopardy, if you were to put Mist head to head in a competition with the best network engineers out there, is it slightly behind? Is it on par? Is it ahead?
Yeah, so I would say the one thing I found also at Mist doing this, there was the architectural change of making sure we actually could build the right architecture and pipelines to actually process this data in real time, build all these AI pipelines. But interesting, the other thing we found is organizationally, and this is what I tell people is, when you see big companies start asking their different business users to work together, that's usually a sign something changing architecturally in the industry. In this case, what I found is I was able to tie the customer support team right up with the data science team, right? And that is where for every ticket, right, every customer support ticket that comes into Mist today, we basically have Marvis answering those tickets right now. And we're at about 70% efficacy. That means that, and these are hard tickets, right? These are tickets like, why is Zeus having a connection problem? Why is the Zoom not working, right? So right now we're at 70% championship, what I call championship level, where I can answer about 70% of the questions that come in our way. I want to get that to 90. To be a champion, my criteria is 90%. It's like, if we get close to 90%, I feel like, I'm on par with network Jeopardy.
Well, the good thing about that, though, is that when Marvis does it, and as a former network engineer, I'm saying this nicely, Marvis doesn't roll his eyes at the user for not knowing what the user is doing, right? So at least, it does it in a nicer way, I suppose. Hey, since Juniper acquired Mist, I noticed there was two other acquisitions. One was Apstra, who's an intent-based networking company, and 128 Technology, which is an SD-WAN company. So explain how I would take Mist, Apstra, 128T with Juniper, put those together. And, tell me about that story.
Yeah. So, when you look when we started Mist, right, the question we were really trying to answer is, why are you having a poor internet experience? It turned out that the access point provided about 80% of the data that we needed to answer that question. And that's one reason when we started Mist that I decided to build an access point, was really to make sure I can get the data needed to answer that question. So, since we've joined Juniper, our mission is really to basically extend Marvis and AI Ops across the Juniper portfolio. And we're really starting that with the enterprise portfolio. So that includes the access points, the switches, and the routers. And interesting, what 128T brings to the party is it brings really two things. One is they have a very unique way of doing tunnelless routing. So they bring a unique way of actually creating these tunnels back to gateways. But more interesting with their session-based routing is they bring more granular information about each session, as opposed to just having visibility of the IPsec tunnel. We actually have visibility into each user. So what IPT 120T allows us to do is now really allows Marvis to answer more questions about applications, right? In addition to connectivity, I can start answering questions about why is your Zoom not behaving properly? And it starts to let me answer questions with more granularity, right? If you're having a connectivity problem, I can now go down into the WAN interface. I can now figure out, is your problem due to some WAN interface? So that is the vision of really extending Marvis across the Juniper enterprise portfolio. And then Apstra is really around the data center. That's kind of the ultimate last piece of the puzzle, right? Somewhere, if you're having a problem from the client, the other endpoint is in the data center somewhere.
That's pretty interesting because that brings an end-to-end aspect to networking that we've never really had before. Like historically, like I said, prior to being an analyst, I was a network engineer, and we thought about WAN engineers, Wi-Fi engineers, data center engineers, campus engineers. But we just have one network now, and so you're able to apply that intelligence across it.
Yeah, and that is really the paradigm shift. This is, in networking now. In the past, it's really been about trying to manage network elements. But going forward, the paradigm shift is you really want to manage the end-to-end user experience, device experience, right? That is the problem that most businesses are dealing with.
Yeah, well, I've described that sort of as a bottoms-up approach to networking, where we start with the elements and we try and infer user experience,
right?
Versus the other way around, where we start with experience and then we work top down to try and understand how each individual component does. So that's that. You're right. That is kind of an interesting shift that's been going on now. Now, if Mist was one of the first, maybe the first network vendor to talk about artificial intelligence. Since then, if I go to Google right now and Google network AI, I'm going to get 100 different things that come up from every vendor out there. Some are AI and some aren't. So if I'm watching this, how do I really know that your AI versus somebody AI is better? What's AI and what's not AI here?
Yeah, when I tell people about AI is a concept, right? It's not machine learning is the algorithms. AI is really the concept of doing something on par with a human. And what I tell people is, you want to look at Marvis and go, how close are we to doing something on par with the human? There's a lot of different fancy math that goes under the hood to actually make that happen. To make that self-driving car, there's a lot of math that goes on to make that car autonomous. Same in the medical industry, right? When you're trying to do cancer diagnosis. So that's my analogy for people. It's like when you look at AI, you really want to answer the question, have they done something that's really close or becoming close on par with the human? In our case, our vision is really, can we really get Marvis to be a member of the IT team? Can we finally get Marvis to the point of it becomes a trusted member and assistant of your IT team that actually can do something on par with someone you would actually hire to help you manage and answer questions on your network.
All right. Now you've mentioned Marvis a couple of times. Can you just go into a bit of detail of what Marvis is? We didn't really define that up front. I'm assuming that it's playing Jarvis like from Iron Man, but what is it? How does it work? Does it replace an engineer? Does it augment them?
Yeah, it doesn't replace engineers. I think the best way I would say it augments engineers. And if you look under the hood of Marvis, what you'll find is a bunch of different algorithms that are there to answer different types of questions, right? To your point of, we use Marvis for every support ticket that comes in. We have different techniques, like, if you look over my shoulder here, things called mutual information. Mutual information helps us answer one type of question that comes in. We have other algorithms like LSTM to answer anomaly detection algorithms, like, are you having connectivity problems beyond normal in your network? And then we have different algorithms like graph databases and temporal correlation that helps us correlate user experiences with configuration problems, right? If someone misconfigures a router, that all of a sudden stops MTU packets, large packets from coming through, that will screw up your authentication. Those are very hard problems to solve. So when you look at Marvis, it's really a collection of different machine learning algorithms that are really put together to really do something on par with a IT domain expert. And then on top of that, there's a conversational interface. Because I think when we look going forward, we saw the transition from kind of the CLI, moving to dashboards. I think the next transition we're going to see in networking is really to these conversational interfaces, becoming a better way to interact with the network, get data, and basically avoid, the swivel chair problem of having to swivel through hundreds of dashboards to get an answer to something.
Yeah, that's an interesting challenge, because it's everyone's gotten used to that swivel chair management style, where I just look across the dashboards and try to correlate the information in my head. Now, you talked about the 70% efficacy. I'm curious to know, how accurate is Mist in Marvis, right? I think when it comes to artificial intelligence, there's always a lot of skepticism. Even with Teslas and things, every time they have an accident, people freak out and things like that. So, where was it? Where's it going? And where do you think you can get to?
Yeah, if you look at the journey of AI ops, Myth, Marvis, and where we started right now, I would say the first thing is around data, right? We probably spent a good year just making sure that we had the data necessary to answer customer support tickets, right? And this is the power of the cloud, right? Because you want to make sure that when you're trying to build this, that the data you need to answer questions is in the cloud. You don't want to have to go to the device, SSH, log in, or do any of that. So that is the first step towards actually getting to that Jeopardy championship level Marvis plane. That's where we started. I would say the second thing we started around is once we got the data in the cloud, it really became efficacy. Having Marvis answer support tickets coming in. And that is really where we started working our way. And we probably started 10, 20%, 4 or 5 years ago, to the point now we're up to 70%. And interesting, that's the same parallel if you look at Jeopardy, how long it took him to build something that could play something on par with a championship level Jeopardy player. So I think we're on par to, I think in parallel with that, we're on par to that right now. We're at 70%, headed to 90% right now.
When do you think you get to 90?
I keep saying as we get closer and closer, it gets harder and harder. You get closer to the last 5%. So I think we're still a year or two away from the 90% range, where we will basically have Marvis answering 90% of all the tickets coming into Mist.
Yeah, it's like my golf swing. You get better fast, and then all of a sudden you plateau, right? So, and by the way, I will tip my hat to the good folks at Mist. As a former network engineer, I can tell you there is nothing harder. I believe this feature. There's nothing harder in corporate IT than solving Wi-Fi problems, just because there's so many variables. It could be everything from DHCP to radius to people not configuring it properly. It's on the client, it's on the access point. So if you can do that, I'm fully confident that you can do, SD-WAN's pretty hard too, but I'm pretty confident you can do the other parts. So there's a lot of interest in artificial intelligence and machine learning. I think it's been positioned as really the next wave of where IT is going. And in fact, I don't think there's any question that IT is going to have a bigger impact societally than maybe anything since we saw the internet. But there is a bit of a skills gap here. So if I'm a network engineer and I'm watching this and I'm interested in AI, what do I do to get started?
I think, the interesting thing, we are putting a ton of pressure on the IT teams right now, right? I mean, we're asking them to go from CLIs, becoming, routing switch AP experts. We're asking them now for them to become Python programmers, right? Because we're basically moving to this cloud API paradigm, which is really forcing the future IT person to really become a good programmer. As we move to AI ops, which is really another form of automation, right? It's basically another tool for helping them automate how they manage these networks. We're really asking the IT teams to start becoming somewhat data scientists. We don't need them to program them, but they at least need to start to understand the basics of the different data science algorithms or what they're good for. So those are kind of the basic skill sets, and it's really happening with Python right now, right? Most of those IT teams are just starting to wrap their arms around programming for APIs and automating with Python scripts and such. AI ops is kind of the next step in that evolution of taking fancier AI ops data science algorithms to actually help automate some of the more complex problems they're dealing with.
Yeah, in fact, this is an interesting trend I've been watching, because a few years ago, if you look at what I've been writing on, Network World and eWEEK and sites like that, it was about help urging network engineers to become programmers. But I think I've taken a step back from that, where it's not really a programmer per se, as much as it is as kind of a software power user. And through the research I've done, it's actually been pretty remarkable that 3/4 of network engineers I've talked to have never made a single API call, right? So we're trying to advance our systems, but I think there is a bit of a skills gap here. So it's a good time to be a network engineer. I think the opportunities in networking have never been greater. You just need to change your skill set a little bit, and then doing things the CLI way is probably rapidly coming to advance.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, you're looking at right now, right? I mean, almost every IT person I know is trying to learn Python, right? The next step is how to basically leverage all the APIs that are becoming available.
All right. Well, Bob, thank you very much for your time. It was great talking about AI, Mist, Wi-Fi, all those things. I think, one of the, really fascinating things about Wi-Fi is it's become this foundational technology, right? It used to be the other network, but now it's the primary network for almost everything, in-store shopping, every hospital, schools, everywhere you go. If you don't have good quality Wi-Fi, you don't have anything. So.
Yeah.
Kudos for the good work you've been doing over there at Juniper. Anyways, thanks, Bob, for joining me in this thought leadership video. I'm Zeus Talks from ZK Research, and on behalf of my partner eWEEK, thank you for watching.